Hello, hello, hello. I'm author and entrepreneur, the cerebral palsy vigilante, Zachary Fennell. Today, I am continuing my series where I'm bringing you face to face with individuals I've mentioned in my cerebral palsy memoir, Off Balance. Today, you've met my friends and family. Today, you get to meet one of my past teachers. Please welcome Mr. Adam Swarsky.
Hello out there.
Thank you for joining me.
I'm very excited. I very rarely get to see my students later as they, get older and get into their lives, and it's always nice to see the impact. So, thank you for the opportunity.
I'm glad you're excited. I'm excited. We're glad we got this together. And first, and I mentioned in Off Balance, if I did if I did a pop quiz out there for everyone and said, what chapter did I mention Mr. Swarsky in? I'm not sure how many of you would remember, but it's chapter 5 in Emergence. And one of the things I mentioned about you is I was the only, you would joke with me, I was the only student to get your jokes. So it's been 12 years since I graduated. Wow. Have you found any more students to get your jokes?
Well, see, I'm going to say it's because of your great intelligence, since I'm going to flatter you as I'm coming to your show here. But, every so often there's someone who's in the back kind of laugh a little bit, and I think they're getting them, but you don't always know. I've had to make them simpler now. It's more your mama jokes rather than, the real deep ones, which you would always pick up on. So.
I'm intrigued now. I want to hear some of those mom jokes. I might have to just sit in one of your classes. You're still on the first floor. Can I just peek out the window and creep around?
Unfortunately, it brush at first floor to second floor, so that would be a little tough. But basically just think of metaphors and similes and how a mama joke could apply to that. So
very, very good. But speaking of being in class, for me, becoming an author, getting into writing, a lot of that I actually, goes back to something you said. I had, for those out there who obviously don't know, I had Adam for freshman and sophomore year of English in high school, and freshman year he would always tout about how, and this is mentioned in my book, so if you've read it, you would know. He always mentioned that it's not easy to ace his class, and I was one of the students who got an A, and so that was something that stayed with me as I was deciding where I was going in life, and that kind of helped build my foundation to become a writer. And so those words, which I'm sure, I don't know if they probably, for you, is probably just something you said in the class, had a profound impact on me. How often do you think about the impact your words are having on the students in your classroom?
Well, first of all, I would say it's not easy to get an F or an A, and those were the two hard grades to get, and I was always glad that when students would step up to the challenge of the A rather than trying to fail and make me prove you're wrong. And believe me, I've had them try to fail. But that's the difficult part with being a teacher. If you're a doctor, you can see the body healing. If you're a lawyer, you can see the case ending. If you're a chef, you can see the food prepared, etc. for all professions. But I think as a teacher, what makes it very challenging is you don't really get to see the impact of your words. You just get bored teenagers trying to check their phones now and pretend, with their heads down and I'm listening. But it is something that I'm hoping is happening. And in fact, I have all my students write a letter to me at the end of the year just to kind of see their impression of what they think. In fact, I start all my classes now with a quote of the day, where I take a famous person's quote and then we discuss it as a class for about 5 to 10 minutes. And I always have the from the teenage response and the this going on, checking their phones. But it was funny. I would say probably 75% of the students said how much they liked it and appreciated the wisdom I was sharing with them, but they would never admit that to you in any other forum. So it is something that I try to take to heart, and like our experience here has helped me see that that does exist. So it is a nice thing to know.
I'm glad. It's funny because as you were talking, I was thinking back to, you coached my older brother Bill in wrestling for a little bit, and I felt a little bit because he decided that wrestling wasn't something he wanted to pursue afterwards. Even though,
And your younger brother too.
Yeah, my younger brother as well. He was somebody. He won his. This is just a fun fact. He won his first wrestling match, and then next day he went into the coaching. He quit because he was having trouble winning that, getting that first victory, and then he got it, and he decided to end his wrestling career on a positive note. And that's just encouragement out there. I wasn't planning on getting this, but that's just some encouragement out there that, if you feel like you're struggling with something and you're not able to get something done, let's just keep working at it and persevere. But getting back to what I did plan to talk about, and as I mentioned with Bill, I wasn't necessarily planning to talk about him, but what you were saying reminds me of it. Teenagers, it's difficult, I'm sure, because like, I even remember when I was younger noticing like my older brother interact with some of my cousins. It's like he would play stupid sometimes because it's not cool to be smart.
Sure he was playing? No, I'm just kidding. Sorry, Bill.
But
As for quitting.
There you go, the revenge. But he, it's just like the cool thing to just show enthusiasm for school or really, and this gets into life in general. It's a lot of times people feel pressured to be like everyone else. I know I was that way in high school. I wanted to just blend in, and I've come to realize that blending in is boring, and you really should blend out. Everyone, and this is a message I hope people get from watching my videos and reading my blog content. Whatever I put out there, if you're, one of the messages I hope you get is that everyone has their differences, and it's about embracing those and not being embarrassed about it. And Adam, you're like, I think back to a lesson you gave us in English class. I don't know if it was my freshman year or sophomore year, but Adam had written a poem that he read it out to the class. He told us the author was unknown and wanted our honest feedback on it. And a lot of kids in the class were ripping it apart, and I probably cracked a joke at it too. And then he's like, by the way, I wrote this. And so, but I feel like that, it kind of, you seem to, even back then, like, you always seem to have kind of like that confidence in who you were. And would you say my assessment is correct? And what advice would you give to others out there watching this who are having a hard time just being able to embrace who they are?
I think it's really funny you say that because probably if you see me in my non-professional persona versus my professional persona, you would be shocked to see that I am more of a kind of a sit back and watch kind of person rather than the active person. But when I get in front of a classroom, something in the back of my brain kicks in, and I don't know if it's an autopilot, I'm not really sure what it is, but the confidence that I'm showing there really isn't the same as I'm living my life. So on one hand, I'm very comfortable in front of the classroom, I'm very outgoing, I'm very outspoken, actually the whole time I'm in the school. But as soon as I get home, I'm like, okay, I don't want to talk to anybody, I would rather, kind of sit back and watch everything else going on around the room, and if I'm in a group of people, then actually there. So I guess what I'm saying is you find something that you enjoy and realize the world doesn't necessarily see you the same way you see yourself. And I think that's important to realize, because the more I talk to people, and I think that's the thing about being a teacher, where you know everybody in every different group. You know the jocks, you know the popular kids, you know the ones who see themselves as nerdy or outcasts or whatever group, and everybody has the same insecurities. Everybody has the same doubts. They just hide it in different ways. And I think if you look at what makes you special as a person, other people see that as well. And I do think that makes a big difference. And I can't tell you that enough, because in fact, I gave my daughter this little box that says there's something special inside, and it's got a little mirror, so when she opens it up, she sees herself. And actually, my mom gave it to me, and I passed it on to her. And I think that's something to remember, though. There is something unique about all of us, and if you appreciate it in yourself, others tend to appreciate it as well.
Yeah, and to go off that, I think from my experience with having cerebral palsy, I feel like the opposite holds true too. If you let what makes you special, if you look at that negatively and you take that and you view it negatively and you make it an obstacle, other people in life are going to make it an obstacle as well. Where, for example, when you had me in class, I was still recovering from my surgery, so I was getting out of classes 5 minutes so I could get 5 minutes early so I can get to the next class. That's something, accommodation, I wouldn't have been something I wanted to talk about at the time with any other students. And so, it becomes this obstacle where it really didn't have to be, where if I was more open about it and someone asked me, like, why did you get to leave class 5 minutes early or whatever, there's no kind of weird unknown. And it's also interesting to know, because I can't say I've always pictured this, but as you were talking, I just had a smile, because I pictured you on your dining room table, jumping on the dining room table to get your kids' attention to do their chores. But so now I know you just saved that for the furniture at the high school, and it's not something you do with your kids at home.
No, they think I'm just quiet. In fact, and I should say this too, if you did tell like other kids, you would have been the most popular kid in school, because you could have taken a friend to carry your books, yes, whether you needed it or not, and you could have, anybody would have been your friend. But you know what, I wanted to actually build off of what you said. My hidden thing is that I'm dyslexic, and so school was always very challenging for me. Where I knew I was smart, but I couldn't apply it. And it was funny, when I went away to college, I got much better grades because I got into the field of advertising. So I was an advertising major. And what always made me struggle in school was I would approach a problem. Most people get the math problem, they go right at it like this. But because of my dyslexia, I would come all the way around from the backside to answer that question, whether in everything that way, which was always a disadvantage because I wasn't thinking like everybody else around me. When I was an advertising major, suddenly I was a rock star because everybody was solving the ad problem this way, and I'm coming from this totally weird spot, and everyone was like, wow, how would you think of that? I'm like, that's just how I think. And so I think, once I learned to embrace that I just see the world a little differently, it's an advantage not to come up with the same answer all the time.
That's awesome. I'm glad you brought that up, because that is, I had done one of these videos with a friend, my friend Mike, who has ADHD, and we kind of talked about, he had an interesting journey for him when he graduated. He's from I met him in college, and he graduated around the same time as me, from high school, or the high school he went to, but in college he ended up taking, it took him 8 years because he was just, there's some financial reasons in there, but then just some, struggle with academics, and it just, whether it's dyslexia, whether it's ADHD, cerebral palsy, there's always something out there, I feel, that is going to, we're all more, I think, and it's kind of ironic, but I think we are a lot more similar than everyone realizes when you realize that we're all different. And so at least that's the take I've been taking with it. And I think from what you said too, it really is like whatever you feel like might be a disadvantage for yourself, for you out there watching right now, it really can, once you find your niche, it turns into an advantage. The only other thing I was going to say is that, well, do you have any other comments? Anything you would like to add? I'm not sure if there's anything you had in mind when I asked you to do this video that you wanted to mention or not.
No, I was just very excited to come in and share this experience with you. I'm very proud of the journey you've taken. In all seriousness, I think it's a journey that I think is wonderful to share. I do know it was difficult when you were in school because people would see you differently. In fact, what he did leave off was he would come in the room and I would go, Fennell, with this hatred. And everyone's like, how could you be mean to this kid? He's poor kid's got cerebral palsy, and you're like growling at him, and I'm like, I don't care. And it was funny.
One of those jokes that nobody else got. We're like, he's being mean, and I'm like, I saw right through it.
But what was the effect it had on the other kids in the class?
It loosened them up.
Yeah, so. It made him part of the class, and I think sometimes we get so worried about how we're going to respond. And in fact, the other joke we would always do was, I would say, Fennell, we're going to have homework tonight. And he'd go, yep, we're going to do 3 questions on blah, blah, blah. And then, why would you do that? And he would go, look at him and goes, you knew he was going to do it anyway. Why? And they go, yeah, we know he was going to do it. So, but I think we should also embrace who we are. And I think you've done that. Even back then, even though it was very uncomfortable, I think it took you to a better place to be able to do that.
Thanks. That means a lot. Like, it's really cool to hear that coming from you, because I was like, and that's another thing I learned in writing Off Balance was I know my perspective and how I perceived myself during those years, and it actually has ended up being a positive for me because now I'm at a point where I'm not worried about making a fool of myself, because I feel like for 18 years I missed out on a lot because I was that quiet person who didn't want to, who felt uncomfortable approaching anyone. So, and I could go on, we could probably go on and talk for hours. I should probably, but a quick perfect example was a couple weeks ago, I actually partook in a 5K at my old high school, and before the race, I was looking over at this one guy who looked similar to, at least to my memory, looked similar to my 5th grade English teacher, or 5th grade teacher, Mr. Englander. And so I was looking over at him, and finally I'm just like, you know what, I'm going to go over and ask if he's Mr. Englander. And I go, Mr. Englander? And he goes, what's that? I go, Mr. Englander? No. He goes, oh no. I'm like, oh, you look like my 5th grade, you look like one of my 5th grade old teachers, and one of my 5th grade teachers. I'm sure you guys don't like being called old teachers.
You know what? It's starting to fit. So it's probably not being a teacher, I guess.
But yeah, it's, and then afterwards, when I walked away, instead of feeling like, oh man, I made a fool of myself, I felt like, well, at least I know, because guess what? If that would have been Mr. Englander, and I didn't go over there and talk to him, I would have I would have kicked myself for not going over and asking in the first place. So it's kind of, why I feel like my extreme internalization that I had of myself in those years I mentioned off balance have kind of blossomed to a point where it's just like I hit that wall where now I'm just like I'm so outgoing because I'm making up for those lost moments, those lost opportunities. And but yeah, enough about me.
Well, I think it also makes the world a funner place because so what, and believe me, I have the same fear, where you walk up and make a fool of yourself. But the truth is, who cares? Now, if I could do that at home as well as at work, it'd be great. But that's mine.
And I think that's actually a great ending point. So if you're out there, you're watching this, and there's got to be something on your mind right now where you're kind of apprehensive about, like whether it's asking somebody out or it's just a fear of admitting to a certain issue with someone, whatever the case may be. Just think about you're always thinking, what if this doesn't? What if it doesn't work out? So what if it doesn't? Let's leave it at that. Let's end that at so what? Try anyways. Yes. And so the final thing we'll do is once this is published and up, maybe we'll test Adam's advertising and see if he can maybe get this the highest viewed video of mine. So
I know my wife will watch it. Love you, sweetie. Hey, kids.
All right. Thanks again for joining me.
My pleasure.
All right.